Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Horror Analysis. With me, Drew. Welcome back, welcome back. Today, we're still talking about monsterness. And we're still in Noel Carroll's Philosophy of Horror, Paradoxes of the Heart. So we're still talking about Carrolls monsters and Carrolls impurities. As you remember, Carroll defines a monster as any being not believed to exist now according to contemporary science. And obviously that isn't enough, because that includes Superman and dragons and fairies and fauns and centaurs, etc., etc., etc. Which fauns and centaurs are fusion monsters. We'll get to that when we get to it. But of course, they need more than just being that. They need to be a threat. So, fairies and fauns are out now. Superman's maybe threatening to some, but he's not threatening to good people like us. And they also need to be impure, which basically throws all those guys out the window and leaves you with horror monsters. Now, impurity is category mistakes. It's when things are really big when they should be really small. Things that should be working singularly, all working together to get you. Unnatural way. And other ones which we'll get into. We talked about magnification and massification last time. Magnification is making things really big. Massification is making things really like a horde of things, an unnatural number of things. We're going to talk about fusion today, which is fusing two categories together. Lobster and men fused together, you get lobster men with antennas and pincers and gills or whatever. They're red, they're radioactive or whatever. You can see these in 50s movies. And or alligator people, which we're actually going to have. Actually, I have a video, a movie poster for the alligator people. It's a fusion of alligators and men, or people, rather. That two categories that shouldn't be fused together, they're impure because they're fused together. The reptile is a man and snake, a woman or snake put together. So, actually, we're going to be talking about fusion on pages 43 through 45 in Noel Carroll. But I want to jump to what he says in the conclusion, since we already talked about magnification and massification. Fusion and fission are means for constructing horrific biologies. Magnification and massification are means for augmenting the powers of already disgusting or phobic creatures. And metonymy, the last one here, we'll get to next time because it's friggin' weird. It's not that bad. It doesn't take me as long to explain it as I thought it would, but we'll get to it next time. It bolsters everything up, and it will be instrumental in lots of things. It essentially is guilt by association. It adds metonymy means a figure of speech that consists of the use of the name of one object or concept for another, which is related or which is apart. Scepter means sovereignty, or the bottle means strong drink, or to count heads or noses for count people. That's the official version. In here, it means the monster doesn't even have to look like a monster, but if enough creepy stuff is going on around him and he's not fazed by it, you know he's the monster. And we'll go into it way more next time because it's part of. I can put fission and metonymy in one video. Fusion's going to be too big to begin with, so I'm not going to add to it right now. But fusion is fusing two categories together. And as you could expect from, lobstermen or alligator people, there's going to be lots of different things that you can fuse together. Once again, when Carroll is talking, I make the mistake to assume Carroll's talking about kinds of monsters. He's not. He's talking about kinds of impurities. And it took me 5 years to correct that mistake, so I'm going to make sure you guys don't make that mistake. When Carroll's talking, he's talking about kinds of impurities. I'm going to just jump from that and start talking about kinds of monsters because it's still in my head, and we are talking about monster-ness. So, Carroll's fusion types, his types of impurity, well, these are all types of impurity as well. Fusion impurity, fission impurity, magnification impurity, massification impurity, and metonymy impurity. But we're talking about fusion today, so inside and outside. The category mistake is there's a category of inside, it's inside stuff, and the category of outside, it's outside stuff. If you fuse them together, it's going to be impure. And you're going to have an interesting monster from that, typified by that impurity. Living and dead. Living is one category. It does not normally meet with dead category, except to pass off, like this meeting is not fused together. You fuse it together, you get something impure, like impurity, like fusion monsters such as zombies, or vampires, or ghosts. I think those, and Frankenstein's monster, the mummy, etc. I'll talk about my problems with that in a bit. Not with Carroll, but with my own brain. When I used to have a problem with Carroll, I don't really have it anymore. Insect human is one that he mentions. He doesn't actually mention any examples of insect human fusions. He does this last one, animal human fusions, he talks about. Pardon me. Hot water. Beautiful. So, insect human, animal human. There's an insect, and there's a human. Spiders and people. If you fuse them together, you get impure creatures, like spider people. Not spider men or spider women, like Spider-Man and Spider-Woman, but monster ones. Inanimate, blah blah blah. Animate, inanimate fusion. Things that are animate, they move around on their own. Things that are inanimate, they don't move around on their own. Fuse them together, and you get something that is impure. This is what Carroll would call haunted houses. Houses don't move on their own. Things in the house are inanimate things. But if they move on their own, it's impure. It's another one I have a problem with, like living and dead. Trumping from the type of impurity to the type of monster, we have a problem with that a bit. And flesh and machine is going to be the other one. Flesh, like humans or animals. Machine, like machines. Fuse them together, you get impure. You get an impurity. The flesh machine impurity, if you wanted to call it one. It's sort of like creates monsters like the Borg from that kind of things, or Frankenstein, the creature Frankenstein. I'm thinking more along the lines of the Frankenstein creature from the Van Helsing movies. He was very much more man-machine, flesh-machine mixture. Kind of Borgy, but steampunk Borg. He wasn't a threat. So he doesn't fall down. He falls down as a horror monster in Carol's eyes. But I'm not as strict as Carol, so I'm okay with him being a monster and still being a non-threat. I don't consider Van Helsing to be a horror movie. It's an action movie, but it's got horror elements. Let's see, what do we have? So what fusion is? Fusion, as Carroll defines it, a fusion figure is a composite that unites attributes held to be categorically distinct or at odds in the cultural scheme of things in unambiguously one spatio-temporally discrete entity. What he means by that is you're fusing them together. Oh, that's so oversimplified. I hate myself a little bit. Not really. Let's break it down, because Carol's being philosophical here, and that doesn't help with normal language. A fusion figure is a monster with that kind of impurity, is a composite that unites attributes held to be categorically distinct, is a mixture of things that shouldn't be put together or aren't normally put together, or at odds in the cultural scheme of things. This is where he adds inanimate, animate, and living dead. In unambiguously one spatio-temporally discrete entity. This is a little bit going into fission monsters, which will be next time. Spatio means space. Temporal means time. So it's not like the creature is a mouse or a rat part of the time and a man part of the time. A were-rat, if you will. It's a were-rat could be considered a fusing of man and rat, because they're categorically distinct, and if you put them in one entity, but they're not the same time. You can get a man-rat, sort of like Splinter from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, who is a rat man. It's not a were-rat, it's a rat man. You get it. Yeah, you're following along, I hope. Were-rat would be spatially not undistinct, or temporally undistinct, because half the time he's a rat and half the time he's a man. If you take the temporal out of it, you have a rat man, a Splinter type thing. If anybody remembers Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, I hope they do, because I feel old if you don't. I almost spilled that water all over me. It's better. Take two. Spatio divisions are weird. Means they're in different spaces. If one monster is in two places at once, like cloning things, evil twins, something along those lines, but it's one creature, but they're in two different places at once. That's, the rat part of them's here, and the man part of them's over here, and they're both working together, but not in the same space. So we're not talking about fission monsters. So maybe I should have gone over fission first. I'm not sure. But fusion's the big one. Fusion's much easier to understand. Well, it's not easier to understand, but it's more central to monsterness. So there's nothing ambiguous about it. There's nothing iffy about a rat man. Splinter is a rat man. He's not a threat, but whatever. So he's not a horror monster, but he's a fusion monster. There's nothing ambiguous about him. He is a rat. At the same time, he is a man. In the same space that he's a man. He is a discrete entity. He is a rat man. There's nothing ambiguous about that. The categories of rat and the categories of man are categorically distinct, but they're fused together. Taking the other example of cultural scheme of things, vampires are living and dead. This cultural scheme of things has separation between living and dead, unless you're really into Hinduism. Or have some supernatural worldview that's very odd, very unconventional. Not odd. I'm not calling you odd. Living and dead are attributes that are at odds in the cultural scheme of things. If you fuse them into a composite that is unambiguously one discrete entity, not he's dead half the time and he's living half the time. It's at the same time he's both living and dead. He is undead. You have a vampire, you have a zombie, or if you have Frankenstein, or if you have a mummy, or something along those lines, or a ghost. Right. That's not helpful. Notes. So, go over the types. Okay, so inside, outside. Oh no, I'm not going over that one. I'll go over the third, fourth, and last one first. For no reason whatsoever. I already talked about insect, human, spider, people. Or, The Fly. Was it Cronenberg's The Fly in the 80s? I think it was. The guy was... Actually, you know what? Carroll would call him a fission monster because he becomes more fly-like. There's a transition there, so he calls it... It's not necessarily temporally discrete. But if you go back to the 60s, where the guy's head is chopped off and a fly's body's face is put on, and then elsewhere you have... No, that's not the same either, because it's spatially the same. Insect human's tough. The closest that Carroll gives to an pure insect human is E.F. Benson's caterpillars, which are just caterpillars that are very long, magnification, with pincers on each leg, like crab pincers, which isn't a human. It's not a human insect, but it's a human. It's an insect crab. Crab people or lobster people, I guess they're orthopods, so they would be not insect human, but orthopod human. Spider people. Praying mantis people. There's a lot more non-insect animal fusions. If we take away the threat part, the chimeras would be a fusion monster. Well, they're a threat too, but they're not so much impure. They're a mix of different animals put together. The Sphinx. There's actually a horror movie about the Egyptian gods. Horror book about the Egyptian gods or something. Somebody being in it. Where was it? Mr. Meldrum's Mania. So an ibis, a bird, on the head of a man is Thoth. There's more Egyptian gods, like the jackal on the head of a man, which was Anubis. The Greeks had the harpies. No, not the harpies. The sirens, which were women birds. Or in some places they're women birds, in some places they're just women. Actually, in Freaks, at the end of Freaks, the bad woman becomes a bird woman, which is not really a supernatural movie. So she didn't actually become a bird woman, but you know. As we mentioned, the alligator people, and the reptile. One of the most famous of the 20th century. You take an octopus, you put it on the guy's face. You add bat wings to the back, and you make it really, really big. So man plus octopus plus bat wings, and you make it magnified. You magnification it, and you get Cthulhu. Pretty obvious. Cthulhu and most of the elder gods in... Actually, I have a picture of Cthulhu, because I was getting out my Arkham House books. There's Cthulhu. Does it have bat wings on him? Can't really see the bat wings. You can see right there. That's to scale. That's a guy being dropped out of Cthulhu's claws. So it's magnified quite large. Not that Lovecraft drew that, but whatever. And Ryla. Nice. Anyway, I like Lovecraft. So, where was I? Oh, okay, so Flesh Machine is another one I can mention. The Borg is the easiest example that comes to mind. Not necessarily a horror monster, but they're impure, but they aren't. You don't shriek away from them. Cyborgs. If you had a movie called The Cyborgs and it was a horror movie, you could make it work. Some of these examples are, if you had made a horror movie, like, I said fawns earlier, and centaurs. If you made a horror movie called The Fawn, you could make it work, because you could make the leprechaun work, you could make the fawn work. He has his panpipes and he's angry at you for some reason and he's killing people. He's the fawn with his little goat legs and his horns. It's essentially a devil if you make it evil. But you could make a movie called The Fawn. Probably be a pretty crap movie, but you could do it. You could make a movie called The Centaur for that matter, and make a bunch of centaurs killing people. A herd of centaurs killing people. Um, so Flesh Machine, you could make the Cyborgs a movie, and have a bunch of half man, half people, machine people killing people, and make it a horror movie. Probably be pretty crap, but that's fine. Frankenstein, if you go to, you could make a Frankenstein that was very machiney. Like this half of his face was a machine, a robot arm, or a steampunk arm, which would be the Van Helsing version of Frankenstein's monster. So those are the three that are easiest to understand: insect human, flesh machine, and animal human. The other three I have a problem with when you're talking about different kinds of monsters. When you're talking about kinds of impurities, I get the point. Living Dead are fusions of attributes that are, in the cultural scheme of things, distinct. But I don't think to make the jump from that kind of impurity to that kind of monster is kind of weird. Especially because Living Dead is such a big category. If you were to take the entirety of all the horror monsters ever, the vast, vast, vast majority of them would be in the Living Dead category. Ghosts, vampires, zombies, Frankenstein's monsters, and mummies. You could get rid of mummies and still have the biggest majority. You could get rid of Frankenstein's and still have the biggest majority. You could probably get rid of everything but ghosts and still have the biggest majority, just because ghosts are so huge. In Stephen King's Dance Macabre, Stephen King calls ghost stories the Mississippi of horror fiction. It is just the biggest. It's the biggest river in the United States. Therefore, it's the biggest. When we're talking about horror fiction, we're talking about the Mississippi of horror is ghost stories. So you have the vast majority will be ghost. The majority of will be ghost stories. The vast, vast majority will be Living Dead stories, and Living Dead impurity and Living Dead fusion. It seems weird to put crabmen and lobstermen and insect men. Oh, I didn't talk about that one. I'll have to do that. In the same breath, you're talking about vampires and zombies. It doesn't fit. There's something wrong there. It may be ineffable. I can't really explain it well, but it doesn't feel the same. Lobstermen and vampires in the same breath? No. That's not the same kind of monster. It's the same kind of impurity in the broad sense of the term, but there's a big difference between categorically distinct lobster and men and at odds in the cultural scheme of things. It seems like it should be its own thing. And the same thing goes for inside, outside, and animate, inanimate. And we'll talk about those too. I do want to go back to, another fusion, because it was one of my favorites. I think I realized after the fact, after reading it 4 or 5 times, that I misread it. But it's a cool example, so I'm going to give it anyway. For fusions. In Harry Potter's books, I love Harry Potter's books, so I'm going to use them as examples. In 2, so we talked about 2 last time when we were talking about magnification, making big spiders, and massification, making all the spiders work together. In the same book, Ron Weasley talks about why he's scared of spiders in the first place, and he's terrified of spiders. And he said when he was really young, he had a teddy bear. And his mischievous brothers, older brothers, turned his teddy bear that he was hugging into a tarantula. Because they're wizards. But how I read it, and how I pictured it in my head, the first few times I read it, and how I still picture it in my head, even though it's not exactly how it's written, was a teddy bear. A beautiful, pretty teddy bear. A huggable, squeezable teddy bear. And then you take that teddy bear and you add extra eyes. You have the two cute teddy bear eyes full of love and happiness, and then you add extra eyes along the side that are malevolent. And you take that cute teddy bear mouth and you make it pincers. Awesome. And you get the cute teddy bear paws, and then you add an extra pair of spider legs. I'm actually going to back up so I can show. Yeah. You have the extra spider legs coming out like this. Spindly and hairy spider legs. And then another pair you have another pair of cute spider feet, and then you have this, the bottom pair of spindly spider legs. So that's how I read it the first couple of times. I still think that is such a great fusion. A teddy bear and a spider. Sorry. So anyway, that was completely off topic. Well, it was on topic, but it was a tangent. But I hope it was a fun tangent, because I think that was great. I still think it's great every time I read that book. So I'm still giggling at myself. My goodness. Alright. So I'm talking about Living Dead, Inside Outside, and Animate Inanimate. Living Dead, by far the vast majority. I can see what Carroll's going for. He's saying, living and dead are distinct in the cultural scheme of things. They're at odds in the cultural scheme of things, and you fuse them together. That's what's going to imply the impurity. It's not what implies the monster. To jump from that kind of impurity to that kind of monster seems a bit big for me. Because I don't think that Living Dead or Inside Outside, when we get to that, which is essentially possession. The bulk of the stories that you're going to be hearing in the Inside Outside are possession, like The Exorcist, which doesn't seem, and Animate Inanimate, Haunted Houses. Haunted Houses, Possession, and Living Dead do not strike me as the same way as Lobster People, or Chimeras, or even Cthulhu. They are, or the Alligator People, or the Reptile. Maybe just because they're visual. The visual is so drastically different. Carroll also mentions Goya's. Oh my goodness, I'm so going to mispronounce this one. Goya. Yavan. Oh, it's on the bottom there. Yavan Desplumados. Goya was Spanish. I'm not. So you see little people chickens at the bottom there, and people birds at the top. Goya borders on horror quite often. Actually, this picture on the Philosophy of Horror book is a Goya painting of Saturn devouring his son. Son. Which is the story of Zeus being... Well, it's not Zeus in this one, it would be... Yeah, I guess it would be Zeus. Well... Jupiter? If it's Roman? I don't know the Roman to Greek conversions. It's Zeus's story where he's a baby, his dad eats the rest of his brothers, and Zeus lives out and eats the cornucopia, and then eventually kicks his dad in the stomach and he vomits out all his brothers. Stuff. Anyway, that's a tangent as well. So, Inside, Outside, Living Dead, and Animate, Inanimate don't feel the same as Cthulhu and Alligator People and Lobstermen and even the cute spider teddy bear, cute teddy bear spider mix, or the caterpillar with crowd pincers on his legs, or even the Borg. Those are obvious fusions. The other ones seem stretchy to me. But we're going to go over them. I've said my piece about why I disagree with those sort of things and why I have the issues on it. And the issue I have isn't clear, but it doesn't feel right to me. So, Living Dead, we've mentioned zombies, vampires, ghosts, Frankenstein's monster, it's a reanimated corpse, and Mummy, also a reanimated corpse in some way, shape, or form. Haunted places, inanimate. I'm going to get it wrong every time. I'm just stumble over it. Haunted places, which is also ghosts, essentially. Stephen King isn't sure whether to call his tarot card of the ghost, or the bad place. He sort of does both. But there's a big tie between a bad place, haunted house, haunted hotel, haunted playground, haunted whatever, gym, which was one of my weird stories, school, orphanage, etc., 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 ad infinitum. It doesn't. There's a connection between that and ghosts. We think that ghosts, the haunt of ghosts, are haunted houses. And actually, I do go so far as to say that we feel weird when ghosts aren't tied to a place. In ghost stories, they're usually called anchors. Anchored ghosts versus unanchored ghosts. Unanchored ghosts don't feel the same, feel right. There are people who do it well. Peter Straub in Ghost Story and Peter Straub in Julia has unanchored ghosts. Joe Hill in Heart-Shaped Box has a ghost that's chasing the main characters across the country. It feels weird. And these are ones that do it well. I don't want to encourage people to do it badly, because it would just be, it feels weird when you do it well. Just stick to having your ghost tied to something. Like a hotel room, even 1408, or the Overlook. Inside, Outside. Carrolls going to talk about a few things that are inside, outside on page 44. When a demon possesses a person, I am Legion. The line is, or if the in The Exorcist, when Regan is possessed, there's something outside, something that should be outside, a demon, inside the little girl. So the fusion is there, sort of. It's one I have a problem with, because ghosts also possess. A ghost possessing. Ghost outside, person's inside. If the ghost is outside and goes inside, it's a fusion, sort of. But it doesn't feel the same as Lobsterman. So, as I've said before, enough. Stop saying it, Drew. So, possession, in that sort of sense, is inside-outside monster. Pardon me, I'm about to sneeze. The other kind of inside-outside is usually, according to Carroll, less common in... Well, he has a lot of examples of it, but it's less common in the amount of works. It's like a brain of a serial killer being put in the body of a corpse. Do I have that book here? I don't. There was a book of Frankenstein stories. I think Asimov put it out, or was the editor of it. And who was it? I think it was F. Paul Wilson. Had a story called, or Chelsea Gwynn Yarborough? One of the two. They both had stories in there, but I think it was Wilson's story. A girl was executed for a crime she didn't commit. And her brain was stored in a laboratory, and then a mad scientist steals it and puts it in a Frankenstein-type monster. And the girl wakes up, and she's in a beautiful place, and her boyfriend's there, the one that actually, in actual fact, turned her into the police and said false things about her and, whatever, and led to her death. And her boyfriend's there, and she's very happy, and the sun's shining and everything. And then she falls asleep, and she has these horrible dreams of being a monster and rampaging through the streets and being chased by villagers with pitchforks. And of course the twist is, no, the dreams are when she's happy and with her boyfriend and in the happy place, and the actual story and the actual real life for her is the rampaging behemoth that she is in the brain of. It's a good one. It's inside her brain, inside the monster, and it shouldn't be. It should be outside the monster. Or there was a Frankenstein movie where Igor's brain is put into the creature. Or The Man with Two Brains, where the woman's brain is put into the guy's. And Steve Martin's. It's not a horror movie, but the example's there. So possession and that kind of brain twisty stuff. Someone's brain in somebody else's head. Man with Two Brains. No. The Man with the Screaming Brain. That's quasi-horror. And it's definitely fusion. Bruce Campbell directed and starred in a movie. He goes to a different country. He gets killed. He has brain damage. Another guy gets killed and has brain damage. The other guy gets killed and his body's messed up. So they take a chunk of the one guy's brain and they adhere it to make the other guy's brain more whole, and sciencey stuff, mad scientist stuff. And you have the Man with the Screaming Brain, because the guy is wandering around, but he has half the other guy's brain in his brain. And they fight with each other about whether to drink whiskey or to drink vodka. And they go blah. And it's horror comedy. It's Bruce Campbell. Bruce Campbell, you should be knowing, is known for horror comedy. So that's inside outside. I have, as I've said, these are the kinds of fusions. And the fusions don't dictate what kind of monster they are as much as they dictate what kind of impurity it is. I can see that there's an impurity about living and dead being fused together, but it's not a fusion in the same way that lobster people are fusions. It's not even impurity. It doesn't feel the same impurity-wise as the same way a lobster people would be an impurity, or an alligator person. So I'm going to disagree respectively with Carroll on that point. But it's only I just want to make another section and say Living Dead is on its own, and haunted houses being part of Living Dead-ishness are also on their own, because they're only inanimate because of the monster in it, with the spirit, the ghost, the demon, whatever is possessing the house. Therefore, inside outside is also possession, and also in that sort of thing. Living Dead, the other kind of possession, the other kind of inside outside, where the brain is being put into the body, that's Living Dead as well. It's a Frankenstein type story. It's a Frankenstein type monster. So it might be fusion in the broad sense, but it's not fusion in the same way Cthulhu is a fusion monster, or Yavan Desplumados are fusion monsters, or the Borg are fusion monsters. Next time, before next time, I would like to have a separate section for Living Dead and others, Bad Place, and Inanimate, Inside Outside, and Inanimate. Those three are their own chunk. The other three, insect human, animal human, living, and flesh machine, I'm okay. Those are pure fusions. That's easy to understand. They're fused. They are category distinct, not so much at odds in the cultural scheme of things. I'm rehashing now, so I'm going to go on to say what's going to be discussed next time. Next time, I'm going to talk about fission monsters and metonymy. Sorry, I did it again. I'm going to talk about fission impurity and the fission monsters that go along with that kind of impurity, and horrific metonymy, and the kind of monsters that go along with that. Of course, Cthulhu will be also has a lot of metonymy. So does Dracula. We're talking about Living Dead. But we're going to talk about some of the other examples of metonymy, and we're going to go over fission, and that should be a decent sized video. Right, that'd actually be my Friday too. Cool. All right. What buttons am I pressing? So till next time, folks, thanks for watching Horror Analysis. My name is Drew. I'll see you all next time. Okay? Which is fusing two categories together. Lobster and men fused together, you get lobster men with antennas and pincers, and gills, or whatever. They're red, they're radioactive, or whatever. You can see these in 50s movies, and or alligator people, which we're actually going to have. Actually, I have a video, a movie poster for the alligator people. It's a fusion of alligators and men, or people, rather. That two categories that shouldn't be fused together, they're impure because they're fused together. The reptile is a man and snake, a woman or snake put together. So actually, we're going to be talking about fusion on pages 43 through 45 in Noel Carroll. But I want to jump to what he says in the conclusion, since we already talked about magnification and massification. Fusion and fission are means for constructing horrific biologies. Magnification and massification are means for augmenting the powers of already disgusting or phobic creatures. And metonymy, the last one here, we'll get to next time because it's friggin' weird. It's not that bad. It doesn't take me as long to explain it as I thought it would, but we'll get to it next time. It bolsters everything up, and it will be instrumental in lots of things. It essentially is guilt by association. It adds metonymy means a figure of speech that consists of the use of the name of one object or concept for another, which is related or which is apart. Scepter means sovereignty, or the bottle means strong drink, or to count heads or noses for count people. That's the official version. In here, it means the monster doesn't even have to look like a monster, but if enough creepy stuff is going on around him and he's not fazed by it, you know he's the monster. And we'll go into it way more next time because it's part of. I can put fission and metonymy in one video. Fusion's going to be too big to begin with, so I'm not going to add to it right now. But fusion is fusing two categories together, and as you could expect from lobstermen or alligator people, there's going to be lots of different things that you can fuse together. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Horror Analysis with me, Drew. Welcome back. Today, we're still talking about monsterness, and we're still in Noel Carroll's Philosophy of Horror, Paradoxes of the Heart. So we're still talking about Carroll's monsters and Carroll's impurities. As you remember, Carroll defines a monster as any being not believed to exist now according to contemporary science. And obviously that isn't enough, because that includes Superman and dragons and fairies and fauns and centaurs, etc., etc., etc. Which fauns and centaurs are fusion monsters. We'll get to that when we get to it. But of course, they need more than just being that. They need to be a threat. So, fairies and fauns are out now. Superman's maybe threatening to some, but he's not threatening to good people like us. And they also need to be impure, which basically throws all those guys out the window and leaves you with horror monsters. Now, impurity is category mistakes. It's when things are really big when they should be really small. Things that should be working singularly, all working together to get you. Unnatural way. And other ones which we'll get into. We talked about magnification and massification last time. Magnification is making things really big. Massification is making things really like a horde of things, an unnatural number of things. We're going to talk about fusion today.